for inviting me. And yes, my name is Kimberly Wynne. I'm a PhD candidate at the Department of Social Anthropology here at the University of Oslo. And the my what I'm oh sorry the title of my presentation is Dominican and Haitian Neighbors Mitigating Mistrust with Respect in the Banana Bateyes on the Dominican-Haitian border. So the material that I'm presenting today springs out of ethnographic fieldwork that I carried out in Monte Cristi. I was there for 1 year. And in my dissertation, I'm writing about moral experience using anthropological analysis. But today I thought I would take the opportunity to explore a theme that came out of my fieldwork as well, which is, of course, Dominican-Haitian relations. And I thought that I would use this opportunity to explore Dominican-Haitian relations in more in an everyday life sense, and how it's a creative practice, not only an overarching institutional or political discourse, and how anti-Haitianism, the ideology may influence Dominicans, but it by no means dictates them. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the area first. So the circle on top, that's roughly where I carried out field work. And then the circle on the bottom is Dajabon, just to give you a sense of how close it is to the border. Another sense I can give you is it's about 40 minutes to drive there. I should say that for the Dominicans living in Monte Cristi, the Haitian migration is perceived as new. And we know that there were a lot of Haitians living in this area prior to the massacre in 1937. However, after the massacre, there were relatively few. So for the Dominicans living there today, the migration that they're experiencing from Haiti, as I said, they perceive it as new. And as they say, they're not accustomed to Haitians. And that, with respect to one of the main themes of the conference, that also we should also look at what kind of migration this is. The Haitians that are coming into Monte Cristi are from rural parts of northern Haiti, and they have lived in the Dominican side of the border for relatively few years. I mean, some of them only a matter of weeks, some of them a couple years. Living in the area as a Haitian resident for 10 years would be considered a very long time. And even those who have lived there for 10 years are continuously traveling back home. So they're always traveling back home to their hometowns, to visit their family, to bring money, to take care of their loved ones with the money they're making on the Dominican side of the border. So there is a very distinct Haitian identity. There is very little intermarriage between Haitians and Dominicans, and there is this identity that others have spoken about, the Dominican-Haitian identity. As far as I could see, that I did not see much of that in my fieldwork, apart from perhaps children. But the problem there is that there were very few Haitian children in my fieldwork who went to school, very few. But those who had gone to Dominican schools, they felt a more Dominican identity. But I can only think of 3 or 4 so very few are going to school. So, but we will see. I mean, obviously this will change, and we will see what happens if more and more of the children of these migrants are going to school. We'll see. Okay, so locally there's a very sort of there's a distinction between who is Haitian and who is Dominican. And so why are the Haitians coming now? What is it that's drawing them now? Well, there's probably many reasons for this, but the reason I'm going to mention, because I think it's most relevant to my fieldwork, is the banana industry. Most people associate Bateyes with sugar production, of course. However, these bateyes were built by the United Fruit Company in the 1940s and the 1950s. And so basically, it was not Haitians who were working for the United Fruit Company. It was the Dominicans. They were arriving from other parts of the country to work on these plantations. And the United Fruit Company left in 1966, 1946, but they left their infrastructure when they left. And so the plantations that they had sort of switched hands, and it's a long story, I won't go into it, but eventually the Dominican state stepped in, and then there were some agrarian reforms, and then what was huge plantations, as we know, United Fruit Company has huge plantations. They were divided into little, very small farms, and today which have been distributed to Dominicans who are living in the area. And today these Dominican farmers have formed fair trade cooperatives, and that was mostly in the 1990s. And they are exporting to Europe, Norway included. So if you see bananas from Dominican Republic in Coop, they are very likely from here. Okay, so then the Haitians started migrating because they found jobs on these small banana farms, which are now owned by Dominican farmers. So I'm going to just give you a few clips to get a sense for the place. Okay, so that's a little bit about the banana history in the area. Okay. So about the local relationship it's between Haitians and Dominicans. This is what the Dominican neighbor has said to me once. It's the relationship between Dominicans and Haitians, she said, is like a marriage without divorce. And I've heard other Dominicans say that too. So I wonder if she has heard it from someone else. And it sort of resonated with me in the context here, because neither the Dominicans living in these Bateyes nor the Haitians living in them really want to live in these Bateyes. I mean, it's a very hard life. It's a very these are very poor communities. Yet they're both drawn there for economic reasons. They rely on each other. They're coexisting and relying on each other in these communities for economic reasons. And then another point I wanted to make about the relationship with this picture. I took a lot of pictures when I was in the field and gave them to families. And this is a picture I took of two very good friends who are in a batey where I spent most of my time. Dominican boy on the left, Haitian on the right. And I gave the picture to the Haitian boy's mother, and she was very happy with the picture. I gave the picture to the Dominican boy's mother, and she was not happy with it. She actually ripped it up. She was very upset. And I think that as she expressed it to me, she was upset with the sort of level of intimacy that her son was showing with the Haitian boy, but also with the way that her son looked. She felt like her son looked very dirty, and she was just very, very embarrassed. And I think she felt like this reflected on her, because locally the way children appear is the mother's responsibility. So here we have this sort of example of fiction and reality, right? We have what they're actually doing in every day, and then when we have a picture of it, how she responds, and what's this sort of fiction-reality contradiction, and sort of, the question becomes sort of why is it important to Dominicans locally to sort of maintain a certain fiction? And when I refer to fiction, I'll come to other examples later. So, and we can take it in the break as well if you have more questions about examples. But and how does it impact Dominican-Haitian relations locally? So one thing I think is important to consider when we're looking at these banana communities is that trust is very difficult to earn in these communities, even among Dominicans and Dominicans. I mean, so even among the Dominican community, there's a lot of mistrust. So when the Haitians are coming in, they're seen as outsiders, right? They haven't lived there, they're not from there. So there's a great deal of mistrust. And why mistrust? Well, these are very, like I said, very poor communities. It's a very fragile life economically. There's a lot of illness. There's shaky social relations. So trust is difficult here. And I think that that sort of goes to this idea that these Bateyes are being shared really by two marginalized groups, because the Bateyeros, the Dominicans living in the Bateyes, are regarded as different from by the from the perspective of Dominicans in town. They're considered different. They're considered the descendants of those who migrated for work, maybe not necessarily like the true, really from Monte Cristi sort of attitudes. They're seen as, for example, a quote from someone in town. They're like the chicks of a bird. They just sit and wait for things to be given to them instead of take control of their life. For this reason, they don't progress. So we have these ideas of progress where the Bateyeros are sort of responsible, seen as responsible for their circumstances because they're choosing to live this way. And then interestingly, the word progress is also used a lot in reference to Haiti. So by Dominicans in the Bateyes as well, they'll say things like, in the Bateyes, it's like Haiti, it never progresses. So you have these ideas. And then also that sort of what happens is you have this idea of peaceful and dangerous Haitians, whereas the Dominicans in town, there's a military checkpoint running between the Bateyes and town. And I think that the point of the checkpoint, as I understand it, is to catch undocumented migrants and weapons. And I don't think that it really successfully does either of those things. And I mean, I don't know about the weapons, but you see undocumented migrants going through it every day, all the time. And also, I mean, but the thing is that even though it's not serving that purpose, it's serving a symbolic purpose, because for the Dominicans in town, they see it as a place that sort of stops what they call the dangerous elements coming in from the Bateyes. And even though there's Haitians living in town, of course there are, they see those Haitians as different than those in the Bateyes. They see them as, well, these Haitians have, lived on this side for many years. They have their children in school. They have papers. They're like us. But what's really interesting, this goes back to the fiction, is this actually not the case, at least from what I found. Because I mean, through my networks, I knew a lot of Haitians who worked on the banana farms but lived in town. And I knew a lot of Haitians in town who did not have their papers, were recently arrived to the country, did not have their children in school. So you have, again, this sort of interesting fiction and reality that's playing here. Okay, so back to, all right. So what happens is, for the Dominicans living in the Bateyes then, they're put in a difficult situation because they're not able to sort of spatially separate themselves from the Haitians. And they're also a marginalized group. And by living among the Haitians, they're already marginalized because they're already sort of connected to that sort of, as I said, that sort of dangerous, agriculture, not town group. And by living among Haitians, it's like, for example, those Dominicans who live in the Bateyes and who've become very intimate with Haitians are said locally to be becoming Haitian. For the Dominicans in the Bateyes, that makes them very uncomfortable. They do not. They're very uncomfortable with that. So what happens is, since they cannot place a spatial separation, I argue that they're using other ways to make marked differentiations, such as personal appearance, household items, ways that they can sort of distinguish themselves. But what's interesting is, like I said, they're very, very poor. So where do they get the money for these things? Well, it's on loan. It's loans. They're in debt. And the Haitians, on the other hand, cannot take out local loans because they're considered not trustworthy. But even if they could, I don't know if they would spend their money that way, because their interest is in the future. They're investing in the future. They're sending their money home to their families back home. And so I think that what gets a little misunderstood locally is the Dominicans see the way that the Haitians are making money. They see they're making money, but they don't see the fruits of their labor, because they don't go to their hometowns in Haiti. And so there's this tendency among the Dominicans to think, well, they like to live this way, because if they didn't, then they would be investing like we do on improving their circumstances, which becomes, of course, another sort of way to differentiate themselves from the Haitians. So that's a misunderstanding, and it's and another way that that, as I mentioned, I'll go back to trust, because can a Haitian become trustworthy? Absolutely, you know, and of course, living there for, you know, a longer period of time and developing, just like anywhere, developing networks, you know, helps. But also, it's for the Dominicans, it's easier for them to trust a Haitian who sort of becomes trustworthy on their terms. So meaning they respect certain boundaries of intimacy and distance. And I can explain that later if there's questions. But because there is a lot of crime here. There's, you know, there's conflict, and so they feel like if they respect certain boundaries of intimacy and distance, they will respect these boundaries in other ways, you know. So and I was just to say that when I was in the field, for example, there was a very unfortunate, very sad incident where a Dominican was killed by a Haitian, and for the Haitians it was terrifying because, you know, I mean, it's not just because they're from Haiti doesn't mean they know all Haitians living in the area. I mean, they come from many different towns. They don't necessarily know each other, but it happens in the area that sometimes if there's like this accusation of sorcery, or there's theft, or, you know, murder, as in this case, all the Haitians in the area are sort of blamed, you know, even though they might not even have known this person who supposedly committed crime. So it's terrifying for them. And so during this period of time, they left the community because they're scared of what could happen. But what's interesting to note is that the farmers a lot of the Dominican farmers took the Haitians they knew very well, and the workers into their home during this time, so they had a place to stay, and they could go back when things settled down. And I mean, you could be cynical and say, oh, they're just protecting their workforce. Sure, you could say that. But I think that it also implies a degree of trust. To invite someone into your home, it does imply, for me, it would imply a degree of trust. So I think that, I should wrap it up. But, see. All right. Right. So I mean, throughout my presentation, I think that we can see ways that that a discourse, anti-Haitian discourse, is influencing the relationship. But I also think we can see how it sort of gradually gets chipped away as Haitian neighbors, and they're living in very intimate settings. They get to know each other. I mean, even for practical reasons, they form relationships, and it turns into friendships. And of course, the practical engagement of their everyday lives begins to sort of clash with these moral conceptions. And I think they're compelled to work through these feelings of insecurity in order to find a comfortable way of living with their Haitian neighbors. And so I think it's important to see this relation as a creative practice. It's constantly being shaped and worked on. It's constantly being defined and redefined. And I will return to the question of why is the fiction important? I wonder if it's important because it gives security in a very insecure place. Sure, anti-Haitianism feeds into this, but there are many other things that they have to worry about. I mean, this is incredibly precarious, very precarious conditions that they're living in. And so I wonder if it also has something to do with finding a feeling of comfort and security in incredibly precarious circumstances. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly, for a great presentation and yourself on time. We'll give the word